Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Inspire Health Podcast. And we are only 2 days away from the live interview that Tay and I are going to be doing with Dr. Jacqueline Hobbs, aka Oracle Girl. And if you haven't heard of this before, make sure you check it out. We are putting a link in the show notes here. And if you're not familiar with Oracle Girl's work, it's really fascinating. Tay and I have been following her work for over 3 years now, and I've found it incredibly beneficial. It's a very hard thing to completely explain here in a short video, but go and check her work out. We'll put a link in the show notes. But we're going to have a live conversation with her on Friday, August 11th at 7 p.m. UTC time. And I believe that is around noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. So that'll be a live show, and we are going to be talking to her about and basically exploring the challenges in these times surrounding our children. We're going to be looking at the ever increasing use of technology. We're going to talk about AI, I think, and we're going to look at where's the line on AI? How much information do you give? When is it too much of a problem? I want to get into all of those details. We're going to be asking her lots of different questions and getting some feedback on this stuff. We're going to look at our relationship with our body and the earth. There are so many physical changes going on that I'm seeing across the board, particularly with a lot of women, from menstrual cycle problems, weight gain, that doesn't make sense and doesn't stand to reason based on what they're eating or their age, all sorts of things. So we're going to chat with her and get her input on that stuff as well. And we're going to explore the concept of giving and money and what does it mean to even be able to work by donation, and how can we even set up systems of exchange for value in a way that's maybe very different from what we are just used to doing through the regular money system. What are some different options on how we can even exchange our goods and services in a way that maybe goes outside of just money? What do we mean when we actually talk about donation? And how do we make that a practical reality? So this is something that we've been exploring a little bit and trying to figure out how we can incorporate aspects of donation into what we do. And so this is something that we're going to explore as well. So I'm going to put the link in the show notes below. Join us live. That's August 11th, Friday. If you are hearing this on UK Health, I think this episode goes out on the Saturday. Now, we did talk about this the week before, but you can just go on to click the link and you can download the video, or you can download the MP3 and just listen to it and watch it after the fact. You don't even have to see it live. You'll still get all the benefits of the conversation. Everything that Oracle Girl does is all by donation. Her entire site is set up by donation. So it's also a really cool thing to go and explore and just see how that's even possible to be able to set something up like that. We are really excited to talk to Jacqueline. She's absolutely amazing. And yeah, it'll be a really cool conversation for us. And I think a lot of learning for ourselves and for everyone else that's going to participate. So in today's show, we are continuing on with our series with Creating a New Earth, a Collaborative Mission, and we are talking to Suzanne Spooner. And so Suzanne is another quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner who actually learned directly by Dolores Cannon, as well as Dolores Cannon's daughter, Julia Cannon. She's taught with Julia. She's one of the people that's been doing this for quite a while and teaches all over the world, and is pretty quite renowned within this discipline. And we had an absolutely fascinating conversation with her. If you're not familiar with it, we talked about the quantum healing hypnosis technique in our last series as well. And I'll put a link to that episode that you guys can check out because it'll go into even other details. But if you're not familiar with it, essentially what Dolores Cannon figured out was a way of going into a specific hypnotic trance that would then allow the individual to directly channel their higher self. And essentially their higher self would be giving them messages and guidance for their own benefit. So Suzanne gets to basically hang out and talk to higher selves all day long and has so much input to share with this information that keeps coming through. And she's had a series of, I think it was 9 episodes that she did with a specific patient that was channeling their higher self, all around what is going on in the world today and what is taking place, and some input that we can all sort of use to help guide us a little bit more effectively through these changing times. So we get into a lot of different conversation with Suzanne, and just a wonderful, wonderful person and real joy to have on this show. So I hope you guys enjoyed this show as well. Make sure to check out the other episodes. They are all fascinating, and I think they are all going to light up different aspects of ourselves for helping us to better look for what could be possible. That's the whole idea of this series. Stir up what could be possible so we get excited about it, and then we actually start to put things into practice to implement it and actually create this new earth that we're all desiring. All right, everybody, much love to all of you. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share these videos as much as you can. That is the best way for us to be able to beat the algorithms that are absolutely not trying to get a lot of this type of content out. So it helps us very much to get this message out, and we very much appreciate your support. All right, take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast, also playing on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. And we are still now in the beginning of our newest series called Creating New Earth, a Collaborative Mission. And today we've got Suzanne Spooner on the show. And Suzanne is a world-renowned explorer of human consciousness using the modalities of hypnosis, meditation, and channeling. Her empowering work in the field of hypnosis began in 2012, learning from the great Dolores Cannon. Suzanne has mastered Dolores' hypnosis technique called Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. She was one of the 6 original level 3 practitioners vetted personally by Dolores and Julia Cannon. Suzanne has done much of this as well. She's taught with Julia. She's assisted back in the day with Dolores when Dolores was alive. She's been on Gaia TV shows. She's done documentaries. And she's also created her own teachable method of channeling called the Art of Universal Knowing, and the guided meditation called the Universal Mind Project. And we are super excited to have Suzanne sharing her experience with all of this work over her past few decades too. So Suzanne, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Suzanne, I wanted to ask you if you can give a bit of background on what it is that you do.
Yeah, that is a great question. So my very wide answer to that, when somebody asks me what I do, usually my husband's beside me and he's like, "Oh no, here we go." It's a lot. But what I like to say to begin with is I just help people solve their problems. And if they ask, well, how do you do that? And I'll say, well, it's a form of hypnosis. And if they'll bite a little bit more, then, this form of hypnosis was developed by Dolores Cannon. She was in the field of hypnotherapy for 45 years. And this process that she created is astounding, because when people come to have a session, they've got questions about their life, of course, and they want to know why things have gone the way they've been. They're good people, but then this happens. I try really hard, but my family was like this, and I don't know what to do. I want a happy life. I don't know what my purpose is. I've got all these health issues. So they come in wanting answers to that. And through this amazing process called Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique, or QHHT, we get them into this really nice deep state of relaxation or hypnosis, and they're able to access not only other past lives that help them, or future lives. Time's kind of a funny thing. There's really no such thing. Lifetimes, let's just say, or experiences, stories. If you don't believe in past lives, you can totally do this and have a wonderful, beneficial experience. So you're going to experience one of those lifetimes or stories that ultimately helps you understand your current life better in just such an amazing way. And when we get done looking at that, then we very easily move over to the part of them that knows everything. Some people call it the high self, subconscious, divine self, superconscious, any name is fine. And from that very deep part of them that we all carry, we all have it, we access the answers to their questions. They find the root reason behind their issues of emotions or health issues. They created their own issues because that's what we do as humans. We create our issues. And because we can create them, we can heal them. And that's what happens in this session. We just get right down to it. And it's a normal thing. It's not a miracle. It happens in just about every session in the most beautiful way. They learn what they need to change in order to maintain their healing or their knowledge that they gained. And away they go and do an improved version of themselves. So it's a pretty cool day.
I love the work. I think it's really fascinating. And if people didn't see the last series we did on life, death, and beyond, exploring our greater reality, we also interviewed Marilyn Dyke, who also does a lot of this work, and a really fascinating interview with her. So you'll cover other information if you want to learn some of the basics around that as well. But one thing I don't think we asked Marilyn was, for people that sometimes see it, how do you know from the therapist perspective, how do you know that the person is tapping into the higher self and it's not subconscious stories or things that they've picked up otherwise from movies or from different things like that? What's been your experience with that? How can you discern the difference?
Oh, it's so cool. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. That's a good one. Well, there's lots of subtle things that as a practitioner we're watching for and listening for. I'd have to take you through class to teach you about all of those things. But when you put those together and you're in person, which we really want everybody to have an in-person experience because it's just always going to be deeper and better. The practitioner can be watching for those very subtle signs that let us know, sometimes they'll float a little bit over to their left brain, to their analytical side, and start questioning, this information. And it's not a hard thing at all to help them go right back over to the right side of the brain where all this knowledge that they carry is at. So it's probably, kind of a learned skill to know that. But even with that, people that are brand new to learning how to do QHHT can have astounding sessions too. So I'm a big advocate for brand new practitioners because I think they give wonderful, wonderful sessions.
Suzanne, what is it about hypnosis and being in that state that allows people to tap into a larger scope of understanding, which then encompasses past lives, future lives, and just a different way of being?
Well, I think what it is when you're in that nice relaxed state, the state is more commonly called theta. Theta is where we're at every day, at least twice. It's where we're at just as we're waking up and just as we're falling asleep. So anybody can do this. There's no one that can't be hypnotized unless you don't want to be, because we can't override free will. But in that really relaxed state is where we more commonly tap into what we might call our gut, our intuition, epiphanies, ahas. That is that part of us, say we'll call it high self, that is trying to help and trying to guide us. Now, the tricky part in a human life is we have free will, and that part of us generally won't override our free will because this is part of the game of an earth life, is hitting the brick wall 3 times and then deciding it hurts and then maybe thinking about another way of going to solve the problem. But in that really nice deep state is this part of us that has all the answers. And in that relaxed state, it's just so much easier to let that flow of information be voiced versus being in a state like we are right now, where we're paying attention, we're, sharing information. We could do it. We definitely could do it. That's where we're actually headed. And we're really, really close to being able to access that anytime we want to. So that's another story, perhaps. But it's just a really beautiful phenomena. And it's a wonderful gift to show people how they do it, so that after the amazing session that they have, when they get back out into their life and a challenge comes up, they are more familiar with just taking a breath in, calming their system down, asking a question, and then trusting that voice or that knowing or that awareness that comes in to help guide them.
Thank you.
We were doing a course just the last while with Paul Selig, and so then every night as we were doing it, and and this went for a little bit. I think we were listening to it. It was a couple of hours in the course, and at night, once the kids are asleep, and we've got some more time to do some of these things without the kids there, and I was listening to him just because it ties in with what you're talking about, and this was during the part where he was asking, taking questions, and so he would kind of, and he immediately tunes into people. He's really quite remarkable. He'll be on this series as well, but I found like he would ask questions. So it's like the person would come in and then he would ask, okay, and what? And you can see him kind of saying quickly to himself a question, and then the answer pops in. Then he asks a question, the answer pops in. And I was sitting there at night after I was done, and then I was meditating, and I basically just started playing with that too. I was like, it's essentially just being in the right state, asking a question, and then allowing whatever to come through, whether it's a visceral knowing or audio or however it shows up. And it was really cool because there was some moments there where I'd sit and I just would pose a question. All of a sudden, blah, 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 would just come straight through, and without trying to censor it at all. That was the key, was just allow it to just flow through. And it was really coherent, and it wasn't tied to trying to intellectually figure it out. It was a really neat process, and it probably happened easier because I was getting sleepy. I was, after doing that whole process, and then I was in that sort of state, probably getting into that alpha theta state anyways. So, but it was really cool experience. I'm thinking like for people to even experiment with that, because like you said, that information is accessible to us. We just have to kind of clear the field so we can connect back to it more clearly.
Yeah, that's right. But Paul is a good friend of mine. So I used to bring him to Des Moines to do workshops before he got so big. So we got to spend a lot of fun time together. And I would sit, in the back of these rooms that we had a lot of people in, and just watch him, and like over and over and over again, kind of like Dolores, how are you doing this? And I'd pick his brain, and and he's so self-effacing and so funny. Like, I don't know how I do it. I don't know. Every time I say that, I don't know if anything's going to come out. And I'm like, Paul, of course it is. He's kind of like reluctant with his gift a bit. I think he's more settled in now. But yes, you're exactly right. That's all it is. And humans tend to make things more complicated. You look at somebody like Paul and like, oh my gosh, I wish that could be me. But find what comes easily to you, and just keep practicing it. We all have something wonderful, amazing, many things about us that are waiting to come through.
I had an experience. This is back when I was teaching meditation within corporations, and I would go in at their lunch hour at this particular spot, and I would teach yoga, breath work, and meditation at the end. And every single time towards the end, when it was time for meditation, this one really sweet, wonderful middle-aged lady would just very politely get up, roll up her mat, and just scurry to the bathroom. And one day I actually, while I was in the bathroom and in the change room, and I checked in with her, I said, is everything okay? I just want to make sure that, nothing's wrong, or you're not offended or in any way by what I'm offering, or if there's something different that I could do that would be more conducive to what you need towards the end of class. And she said, my religious upbringing just doesn't allow for that. If I'm sitting in meditation, it would open me up to things that I might not want to be opened up to. And that was the first time I've heard that feedback. And since then, I have heard that numerous times. And I feel like that's definitely on the back of people's minds sometimes, in that when they're opening themselves up, what are they opening themselves up to? And I know even with when we were doing the course with Paul just recently, he does a beautiful prayer at the beginning of each session. And it's to allow only those energies that would be in the highest good for the evolution of us at this time. And there's another piece too. I was listening to Elena Denan not too long ago, and she was also mentioning that specifically with QHHT sessions, to really specify that you're not connecting with energies that you might not want to bring in. So I know that there's that piece of it, that kind of doesn't allow people to open up to the fullness of possibility of tapping into their higher self. What would you say to that? I'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. Well, the root of everything you're talking about is fear, right? And that's an earth thing that we're working through right now as a collective. And it's I have never had those experiences that Elena talks about in my 11 years of giving sessions, thousands of sessions. I have not had anything like that ever happen. So I don't know what her personal experience is. I know about it a little bit. I'm sorry she has had that experience enough that she feels like she wants to voice that, because that just doesn't seem to be the situation in at all from what I see. And I'm the director of the QHHT official forum of practitioners around the world. So I see stories and session questions coming in from all over the world all day. So I've got a pretty good handle on this. But, our belief system is what we base those situations off of. And, there's probably almost every religion, a lot of societies have fear-based situations, hell and heaven and demons and curses and, all sorts of, a whole buffet of fear that you can pick from and experience if you want to. But the part that we are tapping into is just you. It's this great part of you that is all loving, loves you unconditionally. That part of you doesn't know fear. That's the left brain situation. That's our analytical side where we entertain that. So even Dolores, being respectful of people's belief systems in her induction, she brings in elements that of protection, and she talks about a beautiful pyramid full of white light that's surrounding you, and it's always going to be here with you as we go through this. And I think that helps people that might have some of those fear programs, that they're working through or they've accepted. But once we get into the session, everything is done so genuinely lovingly for that client. And, that doesn't mean that everybody has these lifetimes of unicorns and rainbows and, and that the information isn't sometimes hard to digest because life isn't that way. But what is so beautiful is this part of you that knows you so well, that's been with you with every lifetime, every thought you've ever had as a soul, knows how to deliver the information in the way that you need to have it, to help you understand something in a deeper way than what your analytical mind that entertains the concept of fear and worry would present to you. So I see it always as an incredibly empowering experience. And it seems cliche, but I'll tell my clients, the you that walked in today is not the you that walks out. And it is such a beautiful transformation to witness, from where they come in with a lot of questions and worries and victimhood and I don't get it, and this isn't fair, to when they come out of it empowered and, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way, and that makes such sense. And okay, now I understand it. Now I know what to do to move forward in my highest and best way that I didn't know when I walked in here today. So, I mean, that's just what I see time and time again. And I know that's what Dolores experienced as well.
Can you give some examples of what you've seen happen before as opposed to after sessions?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you about one this week. It's awesome. I did a mom and a daughter. I only do one session a day because it can be, 5 to 7 hours long or so, however long it needs to go. And the mom, oh my gosh, I just loved her. So her life story was hard, as most human lives are. Very neglected, abused, not cared for. And so she just wanted to get along. She just wanted to make it through life. And so she had become quite a people pleaser. And her health issues, she didn't even tell me this one. We didn't find this out till we got into the session. She had very sore shoulders that couldn't raise her arms hardly more than this. And it had been that way for years. And the other really big deal was several years ago, she had fallen. She was a waitress and was carrying a big stack of plates, slipped and fell, and injured her vertebrae in her lower back. And so she's always had pain there, and she's a hardworking lady, and she has had to work with all of this pain here. Also, she didn't tell me, but her high self told me that she had some issues with the lungs. So I'm trying to decide how much to tell you here of this, what's important. So let's go to the body. So again, with the body, we're looking at the symptoms. What Dolores found is symptoms are messages. And if you can understand what the message is and make the change that the message is trying to focus on, get your attention to, then the symptom goes away. It's just a messenger. It's nothing more than that. We just don't know how to treat it that way. If we did, we wouldn't need pharma, and we wouldn't need a lot of the things that we spend a lot of money on. So with this gal, her shoulder pain, her high self told me, was because she carries the weight of so many people's problems. She's a helper. And so you have a problem and you come tell her, she takes it on. And she's done this for her whole life. And so her shoulders are very strained with the weight of all of that on there. So it told her she has to start putting herself first. That's just something that she just never has done. And that if she didn't start doing that, she's really going to have a lot of more serious issues with the shoulders. So this was kind of like a warning bell. When it got to the lower back is where, if you don't feel supported, we'll have issues with the lower back. So for her, it really delved into her relationship with her mom. She loved her mom dearly, but her mom, because of her own stuff, didn't really show a lot of love and had other kids to take care of. And life was very unstable and scary. And she just never felt that support. Well, so I asked the high self what was going on the day of the accident. What was that accident trying to tell her? Because an accident is never an accident. It's just when we're really not paying attention to the message, and it has to do something pretty dramatic. So it says, well, what happened that day was she got word from her mom in another country that her mom was not going to come visit her. The mom wanted to spend time with her other children, not her. Right? And she wasn't feeling that love or that support. Boom, she's down on her back. She injures her vertebrae. It causes lifelong problems. So, and the lungs, the lungs were, she was feeling sadness for so long because of her life situation, and her lungs weren't taking in the breath of life. It was just too sad. So much going on here, And so once it tells us what these symptoms mean, all I have to do is say, well, now that she understands it and we're recording it so she'll be able to listen to it, what are you going to do, to help her fix this? We expect her to be fully healed today. It's just how this goes. And they go, they talk about how they're going to, they're bringing light in, or they're letting it go because now she understands what it is. She's not a victim. Now she can take responsibility for, not accepting other people's stuff, taking priority in her own life, her own self. And after the session, she was so much fun. She opens her eyes up and I said, well, how long do you think you've been laying there? And she goes, I think it's been 15 minutes. And I'm like, it's been like 2.5 hours. And she's like, what? I'm like, I know, it's so cool. And we get talking a little bit more and she's still laying down. I said, by the way, how do your shoulders feel? And she starts, like doing this and that. She's like, whoa, like I haven't been able to do that forever. And I said, what about your back? And she starts wiggling around on my table and she's like, I have no back pain. And I'm like, awesome, perfect. And I just sit up slow, just take a minute. And then by the time she was up and walking, she was like, oh my gosh. And she was like raising her arms up like this, and I haven't done that in years. I'm like, I know it's all of our stuff in our physical body, our experiences, our emotions, our beliefs. And when we muddle through them so long, usually different thoughts, beliefs, and experiences will affect different parts of the body. And we're just unlocking that and finding the information for it so that they can let go of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a question with regards to that. And I know this is not the only incredible story that you have, because I've been looking at your work and you're routinely sharing different stories as such that people have experienced after sessions. My question is, why don't we have this mechanism built in? Like, what actually obstructs our connection to this ability and this deeper knowing?
Yeah, to access that truth, because like what you're talking about is it's essentially like
The truth will set you
heals.
free.
The truth heals. And when you hear it and there's that knowingness, it's like you can really step into spontaneous healing it is a natural occurrence because you dissolve those blocks through the truth. What gets in the way of that?
Well, that is a very deep question, and I'll give you the best answer I can. We have been trained over thousands of years, hundreds of years, to diminish our abilities and our knowing and to trust authority over our sovereign selves. I'll give you an example. We, as a collective, up until probably the last 20 years or so, have really accepted the thought, if you're making it up, it isn't real. If you're making it up, it isn't real. We tell our little people that all the time, your invisible friends, they're not real, and you're just making it up. Well, where do we make stuff up from? We make it up from the right side of our brain, our creativity and our imagination. That's where that lies. Our creativity and our imagination are our greatest connectors to source or God. It's how we create our life, right? So as a collective, we had agreed, we're not victims, to the belief system that what I call the controllers sold us, this bill of goods, that if you're making it up, it isn't real. So therefore, if you have a thought of, oh my gosh, I bet this relates back to my childhood. Oh, I have to be just making that up. That can't, my leg pain cannot be related to that. That's ridiculous. And this is how clever our high selves are. Back in the day when Dolores was doing this great work, and others as well, during that time, clients had what we call the amnesia experience. So they would have a QHHT session or whatever version of it was until Dolores got to this point of QHHT. And the amazing thing was during the session, they didn't feel aware. And afterwards, they didn't have any memory of it. We call it the amnesia state. They didn't fall asleep in a session, but to them, they almost felt as if they did because they had no memory throughout or after. So one of my most favorite parts of my job is I get to hang out with a lot of high selves. And I'm like, Dolores, I want to ask a lot of questions. I want to know everything. And when I started doing this back in 2012, there had been just a start of a change to that amnesia experience. Some people, few at first, were feeling more aware during the sessions. And that meant, in the middle of a session, they might come up a little bit and they'd say things like, I think I'm making this up, or I don't think I'm in deep enough. I don't think you're doing this right. I don't think I'm doing this right. Lots of fear and doubt and worry from the left side. And it was really a weird phenomenon because we're used to them being in this amnesia state. But over all these years, hanging out with the high selves and asking them questions, what they say is, no. So this is, by the way, a really long answer to your question. So I'm getting there. But they say, no. So back in the day of amnesia, that was necessary in order to help people start waking up, help them know that they've got this ability to tap into themselves to get their own answers and healing. We had agreed to the belief that if we're making it up, it isn't real. So if they would have been aware during the sessions back in that time, they instantly would have defaulted to, I made it up, it's not real, and they would have tossed the baby out with the bathwater. So the brilliant high selves one-upped the controllers and took the memory away. So they would get done with a session and they wouldn't remember anything. And Dolores would say, oh no, you had a lifetime back in ancient Egypt and you were this and you did that. And they'd be like, no way. And she's like, yes, here's your cassette tape. Go home and listen to it. And they would take their little cassette tape and they go plug it in and they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's my voice, but I don't remember any of it. That must be real. It was brilliant. It was brilliant because then they started really thinking about this other parts, the parts of them that they haven't been told about or had been diminished to the point of unknowing. And but what the high selves say is we weren't meant to stay in amnesia. That was to get the ball rolling, to help us start waking up. What we're meant to be is exactly what you demonstrated, is that you can quiet yourself down, you can ask a question and all the answers are there. That's where we're meant to be, like an awake and aware high self in a physical body. And so over these last 11 years or so, what I've noticed is it's gone from just a few clients feeling aware in the sessions to almost everybody. And why that's important to say the high selves is you have to know what it feels like to be in a relaxed state and ask your questions and trust that information that's always readily available to you, that we're just not taught about. Because if we knew we had this and we wouldn't rely on authority and we wouldn't doubt ourselves and we wouldn't pop all the pills because we don't, that's the only way to solve our health issues and our mental issues. And so it's part of the process of awakening.
Wow.
I love that. I think that makes so much sense too. And it's in line with, to me, this sort of transition of moving from outer authority to more inner authority, and then owning that consciously so that we are operating from that place on our own accord whenever we want to. We were when you were talking about, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but it made me think about a quote that a couple of different people have talked about, as far as I think how we would sabotage it if we connected it to something as a child or something along those lines. But it was the idea that we tend to think what we perceive through the five senses as being real, and that's it, and that's our reality. And the truth is that that's anywhere from 3% to 0.003% of the greater reality that's still affecting us. And what I'm excited about, and I think the work that you've done for the last while, and that you're probably seeing this transition, is we are able to start to interact with that greater reality in more and more ways, and bring that in to affect our reality here, going well beyond just the five senses.
Yes. And what I would say to that is that extra reality has always been here. We just haven't been open to it or aware of it or knowing of it. It's kind of like, when you start noticing signs, maybe they're numbers or whatever. And then all of a sudden the signs are everywhere. And like, oh my gosh, this started happening to me. And like, here's a funny little conversation I had with a high self once. The client had a question on her list of, can you show me a sign when I, blah, blah, blah. And her self goes, oh my gosh, the signs. Yes, we show her signs. She knows the signs. Then she asks for a sign for the sign. And, okay, well, show her a sign for the sign. Then she wants a sign for the sign for the sign. And we're like, can you just trust us?
Oh, wow.
You must be in stitches laughing sometimes when you're hearing these conversations, because
yes, I just giggle. I do. Oh my God, I love what I do. It's like the best.
Well, and so many times, like, conversations are censored, so you just kind of get the
That's
rawness
right.
of the conversation, which I think is it's
Refreshing.
also why it's so healing, I think, too.
I have a
Good.
question as a follow-up to what you were saying. So then it begs the question, who or what are the controllers? And who keeps them in control? And
Yeah.
why don't we know about this on a conscious level to sever those ties?
Well, I think, as there are many layers to say the high selves, from high self to source, there's many layers of controllers. And, it can be, on a physical level, it can be our leaders that are not making good decisions for us in general for ill-gotten gains. And then there's people behind them, and then there's maybe beings behind them. And, it can get very convoluted very quickly. But I think that's part of our earth experience that we've created and asked to learn from. Again, no victims. In that, we're in this duality world, war, peace, love, hate, easy, hard, all of that. And, when you step back from that and you get the information about, what the heck, why would anybody choose this? I'm sure all of us have driven down the road going, what was I thinking? Like this place is nuts. Um, and what they say is that stop complaining, that you asked to be here. You're here because you want to learn this lesson and that lesson, and you've got that purpose. And the beautiful gift with Earth is we have this whole range of experience. We have the highest of highs, we have the lowest of lows, and we have everything in between. And that's actually a fairly unique experience within the soul's lifetimes. Other places are, the range might be more like this, more like that. So we learn a lot through the trials and tribulations. It's like the crappiest thing to say, but it's the truth. We learn so much from the hardest times in our lives, and it projects us into hopefully better and greater things. Who would, write that script, that, gosh, that stinks. But yeah, it's just part of this experience. And the other part to that I would share is, when people come into a QHHT session, one of the gifts that happens is I get to hear their life story. And every human has an amazing life story. And a lot of them are incredibly hard and difficult. Very few have just, I had a great family, and everybody loved me, and, everybody supported me. That's it happens. It's like sometimes when that happens, like, oh, wow, you are so cool. Like I hardly ever hear that, but what happens, I won't say a lot of times, it's not uncommon when they start going into their hypnosis. The lifetime can be very abstract. It can be nothingness, everything, light, vibration, frequency, sound, colors. It's everything. So a lot of times for those folks that have had the really challenging lives, sometimes their high self will take them to just being. And that might be like floating in space to them, or it might be in light, or they don't have form or a body. There's nothing to do. They can rest. They can just be. They're very happy. Maybe they just feel this great source of love, God. And it just fills them up. And when you get to their high self and you ask, why did you show them that experience? The answer often is, I just want them to know their lifetimes are not always this hard. Sometimes it's a much easier situation. And I had one recently like that. And, we're kind of going through that, I'm just being, there's nothing to do. There's nobody around. I'm just being. And she's like, I'm really bored. There's really nothing to do. And so boom, here comes the current life, and
Wow.
her
It's like,
head's
well, welcome back. Here you go.
there you go. Everything balances.
Suzanne, you did I think it was a 9-part interview series with Ron called The Event. And that was really fascinating. We were watching some of that. And I think that's really timely for where we are, even in this idea of creating a new Earth and a collaborative mission, the concept around this whole series. Can you tell us a little bit about that and even some of the big insights that came up for you going through that whole series?
Or even backtracking just a little bit with, I know Dolores has been talking about
Hmm.
the shift that we're currently in for a very long time, when she was alive. And I'm wondering if you can speak on what it is that she was teaching on and what it is that she was receiving messages through the sessions that she was having with people, and then what that has led to into now this event that is being spoken of.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Part A, part B. So, okay, let's go with yours first, Tia. So Dolores would talk about this new earth, and there's going to be a lot of change, and everything's going to be wonderful on the new earth, and there won't be war and things like that. And it was just such a broad concept. As I learned about her and sat in class and listened to her talk about this. Um, and so back in 2012, when I started doing sessions, that was a huge time. It's 2012, for goodness sakes, we got a lot going on here. And so those questions would come up about what's going on in 2012 and what about the new earth? And they're saying, you're creating this higher vibration experience, and you're getting ready to be done with 3D life, the duality of it. And so in sessions back then, we'd ask about it. And at first, it was not understandable to me why they couldn't just say, okay, on January 16, 2019, everybody's gonna wake up and, colors are going to be brighter and everybody's going to be loving and everything's going to be great. That's what we want. I mean, every time, to this day, I'm guilty of going, when's it going to happen? But, but, but back in the 2012-ish, 2013, when we'd ask those questions, the high selves would say, oh, like things are gonna go down, like things are gonna get a little bit messy. And they'd go, like floods and a tsunami here, some earthquakes, governments are gonna be a little shaky. And so we kind of thought, oh, okay, that, they didn't mention a pandemic and these, you know, so it was kind of cool for practitioners, especially on our forum, because we could, all this information is coming in, what are you guys getting on this? Well, I don't remember when it was when I gave Ron his first session. Oh my gosh, that was hilarious. He wanted a session. He lived down in Florida. I'm in Iowa. I have to do it in person. But my husband and I vacation down not too far from him. And so we had a vacation house for a week, and he was just a friend on Facebook, and he had asked, and I'm like, you gotta come to Iowa. And I said, okay, I'm going to be, kind of close to you. Do you want to, my husband's going to be at an air show one day. You can come up and I can give you a session. And he's like, well, it's a little far. So, I'm going to have to like stay overnight somewhere. And I said, our house has 2 bedrooms. You can come stay with us. And then I delivered information to my husband, and he's like, Suzanne, we don't invite internet friends to stay at our vacation house. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but he looks like Santa Claus. I think it's all good. I think we'll be fine.
He's like, okay, sure.
Ron came on vacation with us, and nicest guy. He got along great with my husband. But we did his first session, and it was at the time, it was one of the most jaw-dropping sessions that I'd given, because it was this beautiful life with Jesus, and it was this great source of information that was coming through him. I think it called itself the I Am. And in that session, it said he's thinking about moving, Ron. And I'm like, oh, where? And it says, well, he needs to be where there's big trees and some water. And I can't remember what else it said. I said, that kind of sounds like Des Moines. Not thinking anything. And then a few weeks later, I get an email from Ron. He's like, I'm moving to Des Moines. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do more sessions. And so I think overall we've done, Ron knows the number, I think it's like 48 sessions we've done over the years. But in one of those sessions, how it would lay out is I channel. So I would channel the questions to ask him. I never knew what they were going to be till they were laid out in front of me. They're pretty good questions I probably wouldn't have asked at all had I not done it that way. And then I'd get him into this state of hypnosis, access this I am part of him, and start asking the questions. And in one of those sessions, it started talking about the event. And I mentioned this before, I had not heard of it called the event before. So I don't know if it had been before. Ron didn't know of it before that. So I don't know if he originated it. I don't know where, but it was such an interesting topic. And so every once in a while, we tap back in and ask questions about the event. And so that's the series of 9 that are there. And the last several, we've had a couple years even between one and another. I think we had 2 years at least, but maybe 3 between 8 and 9 that we just put out. But it's really beautiful information to go listen to. And he has just the chillest vibe when he's under. I think people really enjoy that about Ron.
Yeah, and about yourself. You're such a beautiful facilitator in that as well. I wanted to ask you around that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the event and what that is? I know that people will actually leave the link to the session that you had with Ron just below this video, because it's so interesting and so beautiful to listen to, and we highly encourage people to go and listen to it afterward. But I'm wondering if you can speak about a little bit about the event as well.
And maybe where we are kind of in that timeline at the moment.
It's January 19th.
2019.
You're like, I'm still trying to get that information from Ron.
Maybe make it 2024 now. It's January 19th.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the event is it's that tipping point, I think, of literally, I don't want to say, well, ascending, shifting to a higher vibration and frequency. More commonly, we call this like 4D, 5D. And what they'll say about that timeline and why that's such a hard thing to put a finger on is because they say we as a collective are creating that timeline as we go. It's like a script that's being written on the fly. And so it depends on where we go with our beliefs and our thoughts. This 2020 was phenomenal because it really made the collective look at fear. And are we going to cower? Are we going to question? Are we going to say, I'm not going to partake in it? Beautiful orchestration, by the way, of the collective to look at something that holds us back. So it's kind of like that, it's kind of how we decide to move forward with it. But a client that I've given several sessions to, we're co-writing a book. Her information is also very deep, and she has a different way of kind of explaining the event. She calls herself, it's not a high self, it's the designer of our reality simulations. Her name is Beverly, is the client. She's the one that we've been on Ruben Langdon's show on Gaia TV, interviews with extra dimensionals, I think is what it's called. And that designer of our reality simulations, that's a whole mouthful right there, talks about they're trying to do an overlay of the 5D onto the planet to see how it's working with the simulations, us, all of us. And she'll say sometimes we have to pull it back. There's something that's not working right. There's engineers behind this process with the designer, and they're trying to help all of us get into the place where we're ready to make that. And and this is what I would say is I get it, because I think we can all relate to this. There's moments in our lives, and probably more so in the last several years, where we'll notice, man, you feel really, really good. Like you're really happy and everything looks really nice. And people interact with you and they're so kind and they're so loving. And, you're stopped at a stoplight and you're looking out, and gosh, the beauty of the tree that's beside you just takes your breath away. It's like little moments where we're in that higher vibration and frequency. And I think that's like the overlay. It comes in and it goes out, and it comes in and goes out, and we're individually in control of it as well. It's honest to gosh, it's the number one thing that the high self say to do is meditate. When you can quiet your mind and just get into that space, you're bringing up your vibration, your frequency, and you're welcoming that higher experience in. When you're you're being an activist and you're going to argue about this and you're stupid and you don't know anything, that's low vibration, and you're never going to have that higher 5D thing. So I think the timeline isn't far, to tell you the truth, from what I can gather in my sessions and what I feel in my knowing. And I think we individually have to take our own responsibility for that experience. But then collectively, it's kind of nice to kind of go into observer mode and see, where things are laying with groups and neighbors and the globe. And it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And we're creating it as we go.
Meditation has come up so many times in different episodes we've done, different series, as being such an important part of this overall transition. And I know where some people kind of go to is, well, meditation, though, that's passive. We need to be active. We need to do all these things. But I think the key point of it is that meditation helps us access the part that is the information that we really want, that helps us drive our action in the most appropriate way. And so to me, it's like when we're slowing things down, we're practicing inner stillness, we're spending time in nature, we're meditating, and we're connecting more consciously to that higher self, to that true self. Now we're taking instructions from that. And that's going to land in a different place than taking instructions from the false sense of perceptions and identifications and belief patterns and all these different things that are actually a part of the same old system. So it's like, if we can slow that down and connect to that, it's not passive, but then we will know what to do and we'll act from a different place. That's kind of my understanding and in my personal experience with that, when I'm getting to that place, I get different information and it lands in a different place. It's not usually motivated with, not to say that sometimes like anger or things like this might not surface, but ultimately it's coming at a place of a knowing, and then being more comfortable to say no to things, having a better center within myself to then just act from.
Right. Yeah. I think that reflection and that quiet space is empowering, because then you're not acting out of fear and lashing out, or it's a funny thing. And honest to gosh, I just asked this in yesterday's session, to the high self, how can she stay more connected to you? And she says, meditate. And it just, there's some people, that'll say, I'm a crappy meditator. I'm like, I know, but it's a deal, and it's like, sometimes, it doesn't have to be, this for 30 minutes, it's literally taking a couple of deep breaths. That's all you need to do. And that quiets the mind, that relaxes the body. You could stare at a tree. You could sit outside if the weather's nice enough for you. Take a walk, have your feet on the ground. All of those things are meditation. Listening to your favorite calmer music, that's meditation. When I'm driving, I've got about a 45-minute drive from my home in the country to down at my office downtown. And when the weather's nice, I have my window down and I have my arm out. I don't have anything playing. I want the air and that quiet. And for me, that is my meditation. So there's lots of ways to find it, but what the magical part of that is that is connecting into that part of you that wants to help you so much, and to give you the good information so that you can base your actions, because actions have to happen in order for things to become. You base those actions off of solid foundation instead of, grasping at the air of what to do and kind of floundering.
Mm. That's beautiful. We were actually making this observation just yesterday in that, we don't go into town too often, but we were in town for an appointment yesterday, and we're just observing so many people are just caught up in daily distractions, in ways that are kind of trendy or fun, or just it's what people do, such as like just wearing the ear pods. Is that what they're called? In their ears, and like as they're walking the street, or talking on the phone as they're walking, or gosh, like while we were in Mexico, I feel like poverty was so prevalent there, but yet, with the kids on the streets that were selling just small knickknacks, they all had cell phones. And so where, in societies where so much busyness is encouraged and so much white noise is constantly surrounding us, to actually take the time to lay all of that aside and slow down, and maybe have your kids in less extracurricular stuff, and just make the time. Like yesterday we ended up going to the we felt like our kids were a little bit high strung because we have family visiting, and they have kids and they wanted to play, and we're like, no, let's go, honey, we have a surprise. So we just took them down to the beach, and I realized that not everyone has access to the beach, but just a quiet haven or park or wherever, whatever is accessible to you. But we ended up just going to the beach and just cuddling with them by the beach and doing nothing other than stacking rocks. And that we came back from that experience, and I said to Jay, like, did you feel how they totally grounded and settled? And we all did as a result of taking the time to do just less.
It's so important. They'll say in sessions a lot, there's, what can she do to be unstressed or make life more pleasant? And they'll say, get off of the phone. It's, you guys are doing too much of this, and it's designed to be a distraction. It's designed to keep us unconnected from each other. And so I mean, it's recognizing it and then taking action on it, just like you guys did with your kiddos. The most basic, simple things are the easiest, and we tend to overcomplicate it all. But just a few minutes outside, taking some deep breaths in, make a whole day's stress go away. Yesterday, the client, throughout the whole session, she was taking these big, deep breaths in and out, still talking about these big, deep breaths in and out. And towards the end, because I knew she was going to hear that on the recording, I asked, what's up with all these deep, deep breaths here today? That's not how she was when she and I were over there talking earlier. And it says, she's taken in a lot of sadness. And again, this is what the issue with the lungs was. And we're helping push that out while we're working with her today, just the deep breaths. And if she would just please continue with taking the really deep breaths and filling up her lungs, she'll have a much better grounding for any other situations that come her way. So simple.
Mm-hmm. I think even, with the importance of meditation, it allows us to access that connection so that we actually are able to tap into that frequency within our everyday more regularly. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't have to be a session that you go into. And I think these sessions, excuse me, that you hold are so valuable because it plants the seeds. It lets people know that this is available for them. But through regular meditation, it's these insights and these knowings, these deep knowings, just pop in much more frequently. And this is where I feel like we're able to access our higher knowing more readily.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, and I think then once we kind of grasp onto that concept, it, it shows itself all around. It's like in May, my friend Sarah and I led a tour over to Egypt, and we're talking with the participants before we get started. And we're, one thing I said is, all these temples and pyramids you're going to go to, there's going to be some that you go to and they're going to be like, yeah, okay, whatever, kind of cool. And then there's going to be some that you're, really emotionally connected to, and it's going to come out of nowhere and you're not going to know why. But there's a reason. There's a reason, because you have connection here at some point. We're going to try and figure this all out. And there was one gentleman who I just loved, because he was kind of our he's like, yeah, I don't have any connection to Egypt. I just kind of like you girls, and I just kind of want to see what this was all about. And I'm just here. And it was okay, that's fine. And we went to the first couple places, and he's like, yeah, cool. And we went to, I think it was the temple of Hathor, beautiful Isis type temple. And I turned and I looked at him, and the guy is just bawling. And he's like, I don't know what's happening. I'm like, yes, this is it. Yes, you got it. And so, we were offering the suggestions that, you're probably going to feel something at one of these places, and he's, not me, not me, not me. And then poof, there it is. And I think, that cracks you open, so that throughout life, there might be something that occurs in your normal, ordinary day that just all of a sudden helps you understand something very deeply and profoundly that you didn't have before. But if you stay kind of tight in this little nutshell of, get up, go to work, come home, get up, go to work, come home, nothing is outside of this, life, then you probably won't experience it nearly as often, or it'll probably hit you in the face so hard that you have to. So
Yeah, when you're bunched up so tight and it's like boom. But it's so true. It's why I think just shaking things up in your routine, getting out of routines, you have to get out of routines, because then we run a lot on autopilot when we're in routines. When we're out of our routines, I think we get back in our body a little bit more too.
yeah. And routines are okay, because they ground you, and
Sure.
it's a stable time, and that's really good. But that's why it's good to let your gut guide you a little bit. And again, it's still that part of you that knows everything, but it's kind of like, for folks that discovered Dolores Cannon or Brian Weiss or Dr. Joe Dispenza, or science, or astrophysics, whatever, like they go, whoa, that's kind of cool. There's a reason why that's hitting you that way, and if you keep going with it and exploring, you're going to understand that so much better. So no coincidences, the signs are all around you.
Suzanne, in as we're coming to closing, because I know we're coming up on time here, we want to ask all of our guests what some of the practical applications from your experience, from what you've come across, what can people start to do now to play an active role in creating the life, creating the world that they're going to be excited to live in?
Well, that is such a great question. And you actually touched base on it. You almost stole mine for me. So I'm just going to add to what you said earlier. It's understanding that you hold all of your knowing inside. All of your healing is inside. So one of my easiest hacks is get yourself quiet, take a few deep breaths, maybe even have a piece of paper beside you. And before you do that, write down a question that you want an answer to. And I would suggest not having it be a yes or no. I mean, like a good question. And take a few deep breaths, open your eyes up, grab your pen, and without even thinking, just answer that question. And don't be paying attention to what you're writing. Your only job is to move that pen and get that information through. Then go away. Don't even look at it for a while. Come back, a few hours later, next day, and look at that question and look at the answer. I think you'll be very surprised, not only in the depth of information that came through, but maybe even the way it came through, the voice of it may be just a little bit different than yours, which is how that high self usually tends to come through. It's a little different than our awake and aware selves. But the more you do that, it's like strengthening a muscle to that part of you that knows everything. And then it starts becoming easier. It's your go-to instead of your epiphany and your aha weird moment that you don't know how that happened. So just that's it. Very simply ask a question, record it, write it, trust what that very first thought that comes to mind, and then take a look at it later and see how amazing you are.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I love that exercise. That's actually an exercise that I've often given patients in the past too, is to do sort of a freehand journal, pose a question, and then write without stopping the writing process. It's like if you run it as something to say, rewrite the question out over and over again until spontaneously the next piece comes, and then put it down and leave it. So I love it. I think that's wonderful. What a great way for people to practically start to implement some of this work that you've seen for the past good chunk of time. Suzanne, where can people learn more about the work you're doing? Where can we put the links for people to either set up in a session or do some of the other work that you're doing? I know you're teaching different courses and stuff too.
And you mentioned you have a book that you're co-writing as well.
Yeah, we're in editing. We're hoping to get the editing done within the next couple of weeks, and then hopefully the process will go much faster. So my website is just my name, SuzanneSpooner.com. From there, you can find all my QHHT information, book session. There's my channeling process called the Art of Universal Knowing, or the acronym TAUK, TAUK. The class is there. It's super cheap. I make it just so it's available to anybody that wants to try that. And then for free, there is a Universal Mind Project meditation that's available. I did that several years ago because I just want everybody to know how to access this part of them so they can make their lives easier. So that's just a guided meditation to take people through that. And it doesn't matter if you're a crappy meditator or if you're a bomber meditator, if you've never done it before, if you do it all the time, it works on all levels. And that's probably the best place. If you would like to hear QHHT session segments, I have some awesome clients that allow me to put their sessions out on YouTube. So if you search for me and QHHT on YouTube, you'll find my channel. And there's amazing, amazing sessions there. And it just helps open your mind up to these wonderful aspects that we all carry.
Great. We'll collect all those links from you and we'll place them underneath this video as well as our website so that people can access them easily. That's great.
Wonderful. Suzanne, thank you so much for being a part of this series. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been a blast. It went way too fast.
Thank you, Suzanne.